Hello, everyone. This is a panel discussion about the innovations for the future of international education. This panel will provide an overview of adaptations and lessons learned from international engaged faculty who have persevered throughout COVID. I'd like to introduce the panel speakers: Dr. Jessica Bayless, Professor, School of Interactive Games and Media, RIT Golisano College of Computing; Dr. Carla Stebbins, Program Director, Health Systems Management, RIT Institute of Health Sciences and Technology; Dr. Brian Tomaszewski, Associate Professor, School of Interactive Games and Media, RIT Golisano College of Computing; and Dr. Ji Tong, Professor, Department of Management, RIT Saunders College of Business. And my name is Ian Peterkin. I'm an Assistant Professor in Creative Writing here at RIT Dubai, UAE, and I'll be the moderator. I want to welcome everyone and briefly introduce, which I've done. And even though we are gathering virtually from around the world, we would like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that the Rochester Institute of Technology campus, located in Rochester, New York, is on the traditional territory of the Onondaga land, guaranteed to them by the Treaty of Canandaigua, 1994. They are one of the six nations that make up the sovereign Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We begin with the land acknowledgement as an opportunity to honor the land on which RIT was built and recognize the unique relationship that the indigenous people have with the land. Attendees are requested to please keep your microphones muted throughout the panelist presentations. You may keep your camera active, but please be aware that we are recording the session. So if you are not comfortable for any reason, please feel free to mute your video. I would like to note and thank our American Sign Language interpreters, Cheryl Bovard and Gail Macias, for joining us today and providing access to our deaf and hard of hearing attendees. Our interpreters will be spotlighting their video. For those not using ASL interpreting, we recommend using Gallery View. We will hold a Q&A session after all panelists have presented. Questions can be sent in the Zoom chat throughout the session to all or privately to Lindsay McGrath. We will be compiling your questions for discussion during the Q&A. We will also invite attendees to join in the discussion during this Q&A, but we ask that you use the hand-raising tool in Zoom to signify you would like to speak and wait for the moderator to ask you to unmute. Lindsay will also send out messages in the Zoom chat periodically to please send questions throughout the presentations to all privately to her. On behalf of RIT, we appreciate your interest and participation today. This is the first annual RIT Global Convergence Conference, meaning we look forward to continued dialogue and share best practices for the future of international education. We will be sending out a short conference evaluation and would appreciate your feedback. So having said that, I would like to now turn it over to Dr. Jessica Bayless.
Hello, I'm from the School of Interactive Games and Media, as Ian said, and so I teach game design and development. And I'm going to be talking about creating a virtual cultural experience during COVID. But the first thing that I want to say is that it was not supposed to be a virtual cultural experience. I actually had planned on doing a study abroad program between our partner university, KCG, in Kyoto, Japan, and RIT on the main campus. It was supposed to be during the winter of 2020, and we had recruited about 16 students in February to go on this trip in winter. And so what you see, sort of on the bottom of the screen is a flyer that RIT Global had done for us that, really helped, recruit people. So we had plenty of people to go. And then we know what happened in March, and that was COVID. So the study abroad was canceled, and I have to say thank you both to my partners in KCG and to RIT Global, because RIT Global was like, why don't you do a virtual cultural experience and plan for a virtual cultural experience? And it was for my game prototyping course, and Unfortunately, I was not able to pivot quickly enough to do a virtual cultural experience. Ooh, I'm getting a knitting people from the waiting room. Interesting. I was not able to pivot quickly enough to do the same course in fall, and I was very lucky that my department was able to move the course to spring so that we could actually plan the experience out. Unfortunately, in Japan, the semesters do not mesh very well with the semesters at RIT. They don't align at all. Japan actually is ending their semester around when we are starting our spring semester, and so we made a choice to actually start our program in December because of that. And this is what our program looked like when we had changed it. And that was we started mid December with cultural training. The program was going to be completely online. And so, we decided to have students meet very early on December the 17th. We then had two games that they created together in cross-cultural groups. And then at the end, we had a panel of industry experts that met and with them and provided some feedback on their games. And note that the number of hours in the virtual cultural experience did not match the number of hours in the entire class. And so the class actually continued after that with the beginning of the RIT semester. At least on the RIT side, the KCG students were just getting over their semester. And so at the very beginning, we knew that communication would be our biggest issue. So our first training was a 2-hour session. Uh, we were very lucky to have Modern Languages help out to give us a presentation on how, Japanese communication, cultural differences, because of course online, we all know it's actually harder to communicate in some ways when you're not physically there with a person. And so we were very lucky to address that very early on. And then, of course, 2 days later, the students actually met each other, and we decided to have them collaborate in an online Zoom meeting where we put them into cross cultural groups and we had them do exercises basically. And then they'd come back and they talk about the results of the exercise. And of course, the first thing that we did is a lot of the RT students did not know Japanese. We were actually lucky. We recruited 27 RIT students to actually participate in this, which was a lot more than we're going to go to Kyoto. Some of them were the original people that had been planning to study abroad. Most of them were not. And then we collaborated with 30 students from KCG. And the first thing we wanted to do, since we knew that communication was such a big problem, because most of the RT students did not know Japanese, a lot of the KCG students did not feel comfortable with English. And so we decided to try and break down some of those barriers and have everybody go off and use Google Translate. And that actually turned out to be a very good thing because it turns out that Google Translate is a lot better than it used to be at actually translating things. And so the students gained, some knowledge about how to use it with each other. And they learned that, like, hey, as long as I'm not saying remarkably complicated things, then I can do basic communication and it's not a problem. And so that was actually really helpful. We also wanted them to meet and communicate with each other in other ways to potentially form friendships and things like that. And so doing things that, it turns out that when you do a brainstorming exercise about the games that you have played and the anime that you have seen, it turns out they like the same games and they like the same anime and they can talk about them a lot. And so, those are some of the kinds of exercises we did in the breakout rooms in order to really, help form the initial collaborations. Um, Note that we had a lot of global collaboration tips. We actually did profiles from all of the students to help put them in groups. We did consider, language when we put people in groups. We made sure that all of the groups were balanced in terms of RIT people and KCG people, so that it wasn't, one didn't completely outnumber the other. uh, we told them very strongly that when they created games, they needed to pick a time to meet online and stick with it. So we had a morning group and an evening group because, of course, Japan and Eastern time are about 14-hour time difference. And so it's a big time difference. And so you have a morning group and you have an evening group. Uh, we told them, you really need to pick easy ways to divide up tasks because we're so far off in terms of time zones that you're going to end up passing your work off to other people, and so it's easier if you pick tasks that just divide up easily. For instance, art versus programming versus level design. And so we had a lot of people that, were very successful in actually doing that. And of course, the teams had to decide very early on what shared tools they would use for collaboration. The main tool that we used between our RIT and KCG is we created a Discord server for all of the students. We put them into their groups. They had group channels. And so it was a shared server for the program. We also had some bots that ran on the server that would translate between English and Japanese and English to help again with the communication. And so, we basically, those tools were decided very early on. And then our culminating experience in terms of creating games was we participated as a group in the Global Game Jam 2021. And the Game Jam theme was Lost and Found. We were very lucky. The Global Game Jam is not normally online. It is normally consists of many in-person sites located at different places internationally. They do not collaborate at all normally, but it was online, so it made collaboration a lot easier. And so we had 9 cross-cultural teams, and 9 games created across both. They all worked. They were all very successful. There are some pictures of some of them. One of the interesting things that came out of it was that most of them were bilingual games, as you can kind of see by the text somewhat and the pictures. And also, we had a lot of live translation help. I especially want to thank Benjamin Newell because he helped us a lot in the many different meetings we had translating between Japanese and English. And so these are some of my lessons learned while doing this. The first one is that students, at least on the RIT side, all did a reflection. They really, really seemed to like it. They had participated really heavily. We had one person that dropped out because they were on Pacific time, and it was just their team was meeting way too early in the morning for Pacific time because most everybody was on Eastern time. And so on our side, there was one person that dropped out because of the time zone issue. There were a couple people that dropped out on the KCD side, but everybody else, stayed with us and participated and did really great games. Several then immediately volunteered after this experience to participate in a cross-cultural game jam event hosted between Canada, France, the USA, and Senegal. And so they went from one game jam in right into another. They really seemed to enjoy it. We also, on both sides, we met at the end of it and said we should always do a virtual cultural experience before a study abroad program so that the students can meet each other and they can, we actually plan to run the program again next year. We're wondering if it can be helpful to help with study abroad recruitment. We're not sure about this. This is why it's a question mark at the end of that. Also, many of the students anecdotally, at least in the RT side, said that they wouldn't have done a study abroad. They had not applied to the original one. They said, "Oh, I don't have the time. I feel uncomfortable doing that." There were a lot of reasons for it, but they're perfectly willing to do the virtual cultural experience. Um, Google Translate was much better than it used to be. And also, the last thing, which is a really weird one, we had a speaker from Activision that spoke in my department last week that used PowerPoint 365, and they have live captioning abilities with it that supposedly can do translation. And I'd really like to try that. So that's just something kind of for the future that I'd like to try out. And with that said, that was my presentation, and I look forward to hearing questions at the end.
Ian, you were muted. Sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Carly.
I apologize. Yes, Dr. Stebbins, you're up. Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Carla Stebbins. I run the Health Systems Management Program at RIT. Just some quick background, the program's been around for a while, though we went through a complete curriculum revision and launched that in 2019. Included in this revision, the program's mostly online, but we do now with the revision require students to come to campus 2 times. And then the whole program culminates with a travel course. The name of the course is called Health Systems Analysis and Innovation. To facilitate the travel, I identified a partner in Sweden. The name of the organization is Swedish Healthcare Academy. And I have been partnering with them for almost 3 years now, designing the course that was supposed to be travel, and then revising it because of the pandemic. So the travel course was supposed to take place last summer in July. We had 9 students enrolled. It was going to start on a Sunday evening with a reception. The class itself was going to take place Monday through Friday, culminate with a farewell dinner Friday, and then students would leave on the following Saturday. The course was going to include presentations, lectures, and tours, and then it would have included 1 free day to tour around Stockholm. And of course, their speakers were, members of the healthcare system within hospitals, clinics, and then people from the government also. So the design of the course was in working with RIT and its study abroad program. The students were going to be responsible for the tuition for the course. It was a 3 credit hour graduate course. And then on top of that, there was going to be a program fee that would cover the itinerary that Swedish Healthcare was going to provide us, that included local transportation, a farewell dinner, admission to several museums, and then the hotel cost also. And then on top of that, they were going to be responsible for their own flight, baggage, on your own transportation, and evening meals. The total cost was going to be somewhere around a little bit above $4,000 that they would have paid on top of tuition. Then COVID-19 hit last year around mid-March. RIT suspended all travel, domestic and international. Fortunately, I was in constant communication with our in-country partner as they were experiencing kind of the same things. We determined finally by late March, early April that travel was not going to be resumed. And then we started to think, now what? What are we going to do? So I was considering 3 basic options. One, I could have redesigned the entire course to not include a travel partner. We would have gone and just done, lit reviews on healthcare systems of other countries, and then dove more into the innovation aspect of the course. We did have the opportunity to join other health management programs Swedish Healthcare was partnering with one other school that I'm aware of in Michigan. They invited us to join, but the topic of the course was around an international response to COVID. And then, the third option was I could have redesigned the course with the travel partner for the students. It should be noted that the travel partner, Swedish Healthcare Academy, does not do online education. So that was going to be kind of a lift between the two of us to figure out how we could partner together. Due to the schedule limitations, so I only had a certain window of time that I could offer this course, and the goals and objectives of the course and the program. Option B just didn't really fit for us, so we ended up going with option C. So the new course was designed to be about 2 to 3 days a week over a 6-week period of time between July and August. Swedish Healthcare worked to reschedule all the lectures and presentations and the tours in the mornings, and they ran about 2 to 3 days a week for about most of the presentations were scheduled over about 4 weeks. The speakers and these all took place by Zoom and in the morning to accommodate the time difference, about a 6-hour time difference. The speakers covered the history and culture, an introduction to the healthcare system in Sweden. And then we also had a couple speakers that talked about outcomes and compared the outcomes that Sweden achieved with others in the EU and with the US. So the travel partner had to determine a new pricing structure because the fee that they normally charge, obviously we weren't using any transportation. There was no real tours. There was no real receptions. So they adjusted their fee. Since the students in the course were not able to travel, it just felt odd to charge them a travel fee. So I petitioned the dean of the college and worked with our study abroad office to split the cost of the contract. And in the end, students weren't charged for this virtual experience. So the new course included pre-reading that was obviously built within the LMS. It had a lot of bio sketches of the speakers, brief intro to our partners. Discussion boards were used to facilitate processing of the material after the lectures and morning Zooms. And then they had to do additional reading on top of that around the process of innovation. We included speaker evaluations at the end of each day just to kind of monitor the student experience. Students, in addition to this Zoom experience, they were also working in small teams to innovate a healthcare product and service or process. At the end of the course, the teams recorded and posted their innovation pitch on a discussion board. The peer groups watched and commented on the pitches, and then the pitch recordings were provided to program faculty to review and comment, and that feedback was provided back. So the overall results of last year's course was that students commented that they were extremely disappointed that they didn't get to travel. However, they did learn from the speaker and tours. The individual speaker evaluations were mixed. So that really caused us to kind of sit back and kind of try to figure out what was working, what wasn't. And students provided some fairly good comments to help us if and when the travel restrictions were in place again. So what went well? First of all, students were able to meet the requirement of their degree and finish the program. And they were also provided the opportunity to learn firsthand from the people of Sweden about their healthcare system. They saved a good sized chunk of money not traveling. And then most of my students are adult students, so they have they work and have home responsibilities as well as other things, and their schedule wasn't disrupted. Outside of the morning Zooms, they could still keep up with their responsibilities. Again, it did provide firsthand insight into the country's healthcare system. Instead of just studying it from articles and other materials, they actually got to speak to people from that country. We learned a lot more about the speakers that the students really enjoyed. More or less, these two speakers I'll share the examples with were able to kind of engage students. It was less about a lecture and more of an engaging conversation, engaging dialogue. One physician that was kind of early in the program kind of provided a real overview of the Swedish healthcare system. He talked about demographics and just a lot of history of the country, and kind of from a policy perspective. So he broke the class into small groups, and they worked in breakout rooms to suggest policy that would be given to the government to guide the country for the next 10 years. So the students really enjoyed being engaged and involved, and thinking about how does the outcomes and the situation of the country drive policy going forward. And they learned firsthand that Sweden is experiencing many of the challenges that the US health system is experiencing also. And then one speaker who is a physician that works in a clinic actually used his cell phone and gave a tour of the practice office. He introduced us to the staff. He showed us the exam rooms. He even showed us his calendar and how they schedule appointments and how his day is structured. And then he actually kind of showed outside the window what his office looked like. So the students really felt connected and really engaged in real formal and informal dialogue with them. And I think they really enjoyed that. What didn't go well is, of course, virtual can only accomplish so much. So this really immersive experience into the country's culture, the people, the food, the environment was limited because we weren't actually there. The travel partner did determine a new fee, but in hindsight, it wasn't enough, and it ended up losing money because of it. So of course, we had to be aware of that if we entered into this agreement again. The program, the RET program, incurred a new cost that we weren't used to. We split this cost, but in the future, I don't know that Global's always going to help us with this. So we had to figure out how are we going to be able to, cover this cost long term. There's lots of fatigue. People were just exhausted from COVID. And these are people who are working in healthcare. So, it was a very intense time for them. And then adding on top of this, lots and lots of Zoom experience was again taxing. Some of the speakers were engaging, some weren't. There was kind of a range there. And then students really struggled to see the connection. I think hopefully this part is partly because of the fatigue, but they didn't understand why they were learning about another healthcare system and what that had to do with innovation. So I needed to build a stronger connection between those two. So lessons learned, and this course is scheduled again in the same, it's going to be a very similar virtual format. It starts Monday, like in 2 days. So I'll just walk you through some of the things that we've done. The travel partner increased their fee a bit. We had to make sure that they were being able to sustain this. We had to rearrange the schedule so that we could analyze the health system content first, so students knew what to do with the remaining content. We had to add more pre-course reading so they could just get a better context of what they were learning. Did a better job of prepping the speakers to make sure they were creating engaging content. Encouraged them to allow more open dialogue, so that they could kind of pick up the nuances of the system and their personal experiences with it. And then to really encourage them to embed exercises to help them compare and contrast the systems and the strengths and weaknesses of each. And then we've added a 60-minute additional Zoom, 60 to 75 minutes that I'll have following the Zoom sessions with Sweden so that I can really work with students to process the material and make that stronger connection with the innovation content and project that they have to do. So what's the future? So we're wondering, can we travel again in 2023? We're hoping. If so, I've already talked to our travel partner about creating some a blended course where it won't be just, on site versus online, but it'll be some kind of blended. So we want to use what we've learned and experienced to enrich the travel experience if we're allowed to travel again in 2023. If not, can we continue to enrich this virtual travel experience? Can we learn from others and grow it? I know students would appreciate it somewhat just because of the cost and the interruption in their schedules. But it's going to have to continue to advance and become better and better and get more of this cultural experience in it for us to kind of completely not go with the actual travel. So that's the experience of the health system management program, and it's been a heavy lift, but very exciting. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stebbins. Now we'll move on to Dr. Brian Tomaszewski.
Okay, do you guys see my slide?
Yes, we can.
All right. So hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you today about my work on adapting to remote research and education in Jordan. So this will be a little different, I think, than the previous two presentations. Let's see here. So real quick, thank you for coming to Imagine RIT. Just a quick thank you for supporting RIT, and just to have you learn about who I am. I have a PhD in geography. I'm an associate professor, and my area is broadly labeled geographic information science and technology, which I explain to people is digital maps, GPS, Google Maps, things like that. And I apply that to the topics of disaster management and forced displacement. And that's kind of the theme sort of what my talk is. I just published my second edition of my textbook on this topic. And so let me very quickly try to summarize about 5 or 6 years of work in one slide in about 30 seconds. So for several years, I've been working with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, in Jordan. On the bottom left of your screen, you'll see an overview map of the Middle East. So the Zatri refugee camp is in northern Jordan, and we started some of the first work on teaching refugees themselves how to use geographic information systems or digital mapping. And so that's what this upper right graphic is showing you. It's been a really successful project buying computer equipment. I've personally spent a lot of time in Jordan on the ground educating Syrian refugees on how to do mapping. And so in 2020, we were getting ready for the next chapter in this really exciting project, a new funding to look at how refugees can use maps to make decisions. So the refugee camp is basically a small city. And if you think of how you run a city, maps are essential for everyday things like the electricity, sewer systems, but also community planning and so forth. And we really wanted to empower refugees themselves to be able to use maps for their decision making for their own lives. So 2020, the plan, everything was going great. We had the new UNHCR grant. I was going back to Jordan. I was going to do teaching teachers. I was going to teach teach refugees how to teach others. And it was kind of a mix of education and research where I was going to do help with assessment. How were they really making maps for decision making? And so I was in Jordan in March 2020, when I think you might know where this is going to be headed, because we've heard this a couple times now. So I was there, and this happened. So I was out of the United States when basically the world shut down. I was in the middle of a 2-week trip to Jordan, and about 1 week into it, the government of Jordan, really the kingdom of Jordan, it's called the Hashemite Kingdom, it's ruled by a monarchy. The kingdom decided to shut down. So if you were an outsider, you had to leave quickly. It was a real nightmare. If you remember hearing about I was originally going to fly home through Germany, so I couldn't do that because Europe was closed down. So I basically just threw money at the problem because I was fortunate I could do that. And I got a direct flight. And I was also a pandemic newbie. This picture is kind of a lighthearted picture when I was on my flight out of Jordan. Somebody actually had one of the now famous N95 masks in their suitcase, and they gave me one, and I put it on upside down because I had never worn an N95 mask. So I had to very quickly leave Jordan, and we had to rethink this whole entire project because of what happened. So what did I do to overcome these challenges? Because I was used to being on the ground doing teaching, although we've done virtual things. So in some sense, virtual education, I wasn't, I'm not new to that, but this was definitely for this particular project was a change. So a couple things I did, multi-language YouTube videos, contextually relevant lessons. Similar, I think, to, I saw a lot of parallels with Jessica's presentation about using Google Translate and interpreters. And I did try to connect RAT student projects for my teaching in Rochester. So I'll go over those things now so you can see how I did it. So consulting with UNHCR, I tried first an approach where these lessons I had to give, I very carefully scripted out the entire lesson, and then I used Google Translate to do both text and audio translation into Arabic. As much as I love foreign languages, I don't speak Arabic. I know a few words, but so this is kind of how that came out. This is like a 10-second clip. Review existing libraries. مراجعة المكتبات الموجودة. So it's the content doesn't really matter, but it's more the sort of the pedagogical approach. So you heard me speaking in English, then you heard sort of using Google Translate, where I put the English text in, recorded the Arabic, and then put it into a YouTube video. And it had honestly some moderate success. A lot of the people, the Syrian refugees and Jordanians I was teaching, many of them don't really speak English, although some of them speak English fantastic. But they seemed eventually they didn't really care for having the sort of robo Arabic. Maybe it was a pride factor. I don't know, but so we tried it though. That's what you do in these situations. You innovate and try to overcome the challenges. So that was one approach. And then of course, you're going to hear me say this again at the end, but contextually relevant lessons, really opportunity. So what you see here is we changed the plan around to teach them about things that were relevant to what was happening with the pandemic and their lived experiences. So in this, what you're seeing here is I'm showing them how to build basically a survey, kind of like if you were to walk around with a clipboard and you were to ask questions to people. This is the more modern information technology version of that, building a digital survey. And this one is related to food security and the pandemic, which is something they do every year anyways in the refugee camp. They want to know how people are coping and so forth. But I really made a point of changing the plan around so they could learn how to use digital tools and mapping tools to overcome the challenges that they themselves were facing in a refugee camp. I mean, we had it hard enough here in the United States, but by comparison, if you're living in a refugee camp or some other very challenging environment, the sets of problems are a lot different. And so I wanted to try to use the resources and assets we had to help them with this. Another thing we did, again, similar to what Jessica Bayless talked about, interpreter, they used MS Teams instead of Zoom. And so I'll give you a little window into what this was like. This is a 40-second clip of a meeting. This is from December 2020. And you can kind of see how the dynamics went. And also, again, this theme, I'm going to wrap this presentation up with opportunities for people that the pandemic actually created. So let's just listen. It's only 40 seconds here. Still sort of map, COVID map. Okay. Yeah. Okay, looks great. Okay. Great. Looks great.
Okay, sorry, Brian, but let me tell the team about what happened.
Sure.
Okay.
Of course. Go ahead.
Translate.
Yes.
Yeah, بس كنت بستنى الفرصة بس عشان أحكي لكم إنه شو اللي عملناه هلا. طبعا اول شيء ورينا الداشبورد اللي احنا اشتغلنا عليه تمام واعطانا فكره كثير حلوه برايان انه نعمل الداشبورد هذا نضيف له اللغه العربيه مثلا لما احنا عاملينه باللغه الانجليزيه.
So I spent a lot of time, and I have spent a lot of time basically saying things in English and then having somebody repeat them back to me in Arabic. So I've learned a few words. I've learned tamam, which means like kind of like get it, and I hear my name. But the woman who spoke was very eager to practice her English skills. And so it's been interesting. I've had a lot of different interpreters over the years working with me, and a lot of them speak fantastic English. And this whole process has given them opportunity to learn English. And you heard her speak English before she started speaking Arabic, and she was right on it. So that was kind of an interesting experience. And this wasn't something new. I've done this before, but again, I'm always trying to bring my teaching on the Rochester RIT campus into my international research and education. So while this was all going on, I was teaching a class called Spatial Algorithms and Problem Solving. And the students are often looking for projects. A lot of the students in my college, they have an amazing range of technical skills. They're trained on how to do computer programming and building apps. They don't often though have a lot of really necessarily compelling ideas. They need things to try out their skills on. So in this particular case, I was talking about how we could do an information extraction of health data from a website and sort of automatically pull that off of a web page and put that into a COVID dashboard. So what you see here is I had a student, his name was Matthew Turry, um, who built a tool to do that, and I connected him into one of those meetings like I showed you earlier. So again, it gave the RIT students kind of similar that we heard in the previous talks about an international experience, connecting them. So I got to connect an RIT student with Syrian refugees and Jordanians as part of this process for sort of a cultural exchange. And to me as an educator, that's always a really satisfying aspect of the work I do. So really the takeaway points, find the opportunities. COVID certainly turned the world upside down. Everyone's challenging, but I mean, maybe that's just my personal philosophy, but whenever I'm faced with a challenge, I try to find the opportunity. So like I alluded to, mentioned earlier, the people in Jordan, it was great opportunities for them to practice just interpreting English, building new technologies to deal with their problems, me as an educator, rethinking my lessons, professional development, again, for people in Jordan to give them the opportunities to do translations in real time. These are all skills that these people are really eager to seek. And if I can provide that to them through RIT, that's great. And I guess the main takeaway point, be flexible and creative. I've worked in a lot of developing countries, so I'm used to things like the power going out, no internet, and so forth. So always challenge your own assumptions about what you do with your teaching. And I think some of the previous presentations were good examples of that as well. People really having to adapt and rise to the occasion, and that's why RIT is such a great place to work at when we have so many amazing people here. And I also just wanted to mention this gentleman is Sufyan. He passed away. He had cancer actually. He was the original interpreter translator who was really pivotal in making the project happen. So I just wanted to give him a moment of recognition in this. He passed away about a couple months ago, but he he was connected to RIT, and I had done sessions with him and so forth with RIT students. So with that, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions you may have. And thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Tomaszewski. And now we're going to move on to Dr. G. Tong. Tong,
Thank you,
it's up to you, man.
Ian. Thank you. Let me share. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. In Rochester, it's a very rare sunny Saturday morning. We have been having very cold rain, even snowflakes flakes in the past few days. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to communicate with everybody here, and also my colleagues. Some of the experiments is first time for me to hear about those experiments, and I think I also learned a lot from my colleagues here. So slightly different from my colleague, I'm going to talk about the two courses, not research project or program level. So brief background introduction, I am a professor in international business at RIT. So for this degree, we always have to do some sort of global collaborations. Actually, the study abroad or doing co-op overseas is part of almost a requirement for our international business students in Rochester. Um, Thanks to the decades of work of RIT Global Education Office, international business degree actually has four locations in the world. So we have Rochester location here. And also we have one location in, pardon for my browse, it's in Croatia. So it has about 400 students there. And we also have one IB degree in Dubai. I know it's not Dubai I'm pointing to. And also we don't have IB degree in China, but we do have a graduate degree entrepreneurship, MS degree in entrepreneurship in Beijing, China. So um, we have been doing lots of global collaborations under this framework. In the past few years, I have led multiple year effort with so-called USA Croatia exchange program. In that program, we recruit students from both campuses, and they will stay half of the semester in one location and move to another country, the other country for the second half of the semester, and taking 5 courses together. The cost and structure of the logistics challenge very similar to what my Jessica and Carla have mentioned. So students have to pay top dollars on top of their tuition. It's very expensive for them to do so, so we try our best to reduce the cost. COVID, to a degree, bring lots of logistics challenge to us, but also open new door to us. Before COVID, I have to admit that in my college, we want to leverage online teaching model, but we also concerned about the effectiveness of this teaching model. Online always feel more like complementary role instead of a dominant role. But this time we've been forced to adopt online model and made us to really feel like probably we can do something we used to not be able to do. The two courses I want to mention here, one is global entrepreneurship, is graduate level course. And this course, we have to adapt to the new reality created by COVID. The other one is a new course in the proposal, is undergraduate course, is called Global Innovation. Global innovation is right now is in a proposal stage. This is actually inspired by an experiment we have conducted across 4 campuses, and we feel like we actually can leverage the online virtual network to do something that we never been able to do. So the GE course is the collaboration between RIT and our sister university in Beijing, Beijing Jiaotong University. And the GI is the collaboration across 4 campuses we have in China, Dubai, UAE, Zagreb, Croatia, and Rochester, of course. And I have 3 collaborators, Julia from China. Big shout out to her. I see she's here. Hi, Julia. And my long-term colleague I know for a long time, Rizwan from Dubai, Venja from Zagreb, and myself. Yes, Julia, thank you. So for the GE course, we have to adapt to the reality. So very similar to what we have heard from my colleague. The GE course is, we have been running it for a long time. So the model is we teach the same master level course in both Beijing Jiaotong University. We have the entrepreneurship program there, and we also have the same MS program in Rochester. So the Rochester course is offered in springtime, and the Beijing course offered in wintertime. So what we normally do is I would fly to Beijing during winter break and teach those students during the Christmas break. My college cannot find anyone else to do it during holiday season, so I have to do it. And then when I was teaching in Beijing, we will finish all the lectures, but I told the students that only count 60% of their grade. Then I will come back and tell the students in Beijing 40% of their project, of their grade will be determined by a semester-long project. They will work with Rochester students. So in January, Rochester class starts. So I'm teaching Rochester students all the lectures. At the same time, I direct Rochester students and Beijing students collaborate. They will form different teams, work on their own entrepreneurial project. Usually it's global entrepreneurial project. So, and COVID disrupts everything. Even for this model, first, I couldn't go to Beijing last winter. I had to teach a class online. I'm sure most people feel the same way. When we switch from in-person class to online class, we lost lots of information of students. I lost the touch of the students. When I was teaching in Beijing, we can talk during the break time of classes, and they can visit me during office hours. They will ask me questions after the class. Not like, when we move online to Zoom, when the class finish, I will just, ask any questions. If no questions, I will just close the Zoom. This is very different from in person. In person, even though students may not have questions, but they don't feel like, well, I'm holding you back, professor. I can still talk to you. Those character checks very important. After we move online, I feel it's very, very difficult for me to manage a class with about 50 to 60 students across different campuses. And I always feel the optimal size for an online class probably just 20 to 25 students maximum. So what we adopt is we have to make sure that because students from both campuses, we need boots on grounds. I have a coordinator in Beijing who works with me very closely. Dr. Yinping, also director of the program. So I rely on Yinping a lot, Dr. Ping a lot to give instructions to the students, make sure the students will complete the instructions. I would say a moderator, a person over there is very important for us to achieve our learning objectives. Another one is we preset expectations very clearly. Like I gave lots of requirements to the students. During the class, they need to have their camera on all time. There is no exception, even though the class is 3 hours straight at once. I don't accept any excuses. They cannot have cameras on. So I gave this instruction very early on, so they know the expectation before they take in the class. So they need to find a way to make sure it happens. Sometimes I find students go to cafe instead of staying at home because cafe will have a better internet connection than their home internet. And my class is offered in the middle of the program. So before the program started, we had a meeting with all the instructors in the program. So pretty much all the instructors have similar instructions to the students. So we execute all the instructions consistently. That really, when students get to my hand, I find it's very easy to just hold them to those expectations because they know that being trained by 4 or 5 courses already, they know that's what they should be doing. Also, we scripted the semester-long exercise. As I said, the students just too big for effective online learning environment for me. But we feel like a short but intense hands-on programs like 24-hour challenge or 48-hour challenge seems to work equally well and it's easier for us to manage during pure virtual environment. We also have lots of challenges. Relying totally on technology, technology can create lots of things. As I mentioned, internet technology are not created equally. We even in United States, I had students talking to me that some of them don't have a computer. They can only rely on their smartphone. That create lots of challenge for them to move completely online environment. Another one is the communication tool in China is a really moving target. When I first started teaching this course, we could use like WhatsApp back then. We could use lots of communication tools between the two countries. And about 2 years ago, we could only rely on back then Zoom was not big, but it was Skype and WeChat. And then last year, WeChat become an issue for being used in United States. So we can only expect the communication situation will even become more complicated, especially for these two countries. But probably that will also call more creative approach to address this issue. And also for the online document sharing, we just have very hard time to find an online document sharing platform accepted in both countries. That's a huge problem for us, especially for students doing their projects. But also we're inspired to do something that we never thought we would have done. We have the 4 campuses in so many different time zones, and it's a big advantage to us, but at the same time create huge logistics issues for us to work across all the campuses. So this year, actually is last year, past fall, all the campuses need to teach one required course, which is International Business Introduction course. So Lindsay, also the organizer of this conference, just shoot all of us an email asking if we're interested, since we are all online now, if we're interested to have some sort of collaboration. Really, really appreciate this email and a request, and made us begin to think how we can collaborate. We have Rizwan in Dubai, Julia in Weihai, and Benja in Croatia. All 4 of us started thinking how we can really leverage our expertise together. Back then in the fall, probably you still remember, COVID just started not long ago. We were sort of in the damage control mode. And I was teaching a very complicated mode, AD mode, for the students, and they rotate when they should go online, when they should go in-person teaching. And I'm confused. I was confused. Students confused. Everybody confused. So I said, well, I cannot have student collaboration when we're in such mode, but I'm willing to open my class to guest lectures from all my 3 colleagues. It turned out to be very, very interesting collaboration. All 3 of my colleagues did a guest lecture to my class, and students can really see the difference of our teaching style, the European style, Dubai style, and American style in China. So I have enjoyed teach about European Union. I can never teach this topic as well as someone who lives in EU, teaches in EU, and interact with EU the whole time. And also when I have Julia give the guest lecture, she has very creative idea. She said, well, instead of she's giving the lecture, and she asked her top students, Chinese students, I think about 7 to 8 of them, to give the lecture to my class. I feel guilty because it should be midnight in China, but those students stayed very late in China and give very good lecture to my class. And what followed it was very interesting because you began to say, I ask my American students to ask questions, and they began to ask pretty sensitive questions. So both Julia and I have to moderate the class very carefully. Very carefully. It's very interesting to see the dynamics between the Chinese and American and graduate students. So after that experiment, we all four of us being inspired, we feel like, wow, this really make us feel like we always concerned about the teaching, learning effectiveness with online teaching model, but probably we can do something that we never been able to do because of the Zoom teaching model. So we co-proposed the new course, Global Innovation. Innovation, we have been wanting to create this course for a few years, but because of the lack of expertise in one campus, individual campus, we couldn't propose this course. But working together, we realized that I probably did research in this area. I do have theoretical background about this area. And then we have Rizwan, who worked for large multinational technology companies for quite a few years, really complement to my background. And we have Julia, who is American professor, but teaching in China, knows the second largest market very well. And we have Venja, and EU market is such important market to set all the, especially right now, about the norms and rules using the AI or more advanced technology, especially how to protect consumers' interests, consumers' data. EU has been really pioneer in this field that both China and the United States cannot match up. So now we got together, four of us, we can leverage each other's expertise. And we want to create this class as a co-teaching model. So we will have the same class in all four campuses, and we will open for our students to register to each individual class. And then we will co-teach each section, and then we'll ask students to collaborate with each other and work on the projects. So students can truly learn about the how to do international business by doing it. Of course, we have challenges at this moment. So we have
Dr. G,
yes,
sorry to interrupt. We have to move on to the Q&A, but we can use this as an opportunity for anything that you didn't cover. Maybe we can discuss it in the Q&A.
sure. Okay, so I'm sorry, Yin. Should we start
yeah,
with
so
the Q&A?
yes. The first question we have here is a two-parter. Will virtual connectivity and the ability to connect more regularly or in advance of future in-person experiences allow you to adjust student learning outcomes and research goals? The other question is, will you be able to introduce people and basic concepts virtually and spend more time on advanced topics in person in the future? Maybe you can take the first crack at that, Dr. G.
I think most of the time when people think of the global education, especially with the logistic concerns and time zone difference, it's really about. I think people worry about the effectiveness, how effective it's going to be with online teaching. But our experiment really shows that if we carefully craft the teaching mode, such as the new course we just promoted, and make it asynchronous, but at the same time combine with synchronous teaching model, actually we can achieve the benefits from both sides. So that's what I've learned from my experiment.
And you mentioned something earlier that caught my attention. You said that adjusting to the whole Zoom environment, you used to end your sessions at the end and you didn't hang out afterwards. And I learned that the hard way myself. It was in one of my teaching evaluations last semester. The student wrote, he just ends the session right after. And it never occurred to me, like, yes, they need those few minutes because I used to walk down the hallways with them And now they expect you to still be there for a few minutes. So now I make it a part of my regular routine, and that's one of the minor adjustments that we had to learn in this new asynchronous learning environment, like you pointed out. Thank you. Now, as a reminder to you, you can send your questions in the chat privately to Lindsay McGrath, or you can put it out there for everyone, or you can simply raise your hand by signifying with the hand icon, and you'll be called upon. Well, since we don't have any takers right now, I'd like to throw this to Dr. Tomaszewski. Well, actually, no, there's a question. Apologies. Let's see here. Do you expect to continue using blended learning even after COVID? That's a really good question. Brian?
Yes. I mean, the quick answer. I mean, I was using, me personally, I've used blended learning before COVID. I think even now we've seen the importance of it. And I think it ties back to the previous question about how much can you front load topics through virtual to make better use of when you hear about how expensive it is to go to Europe and all that. So you really want to get the maximum sort of same bang for your buck. Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely.
And Carla, since you're doing health sciences, are there maybe some interactive things that you can do? Like you touched upon some, but have you thought about what the future would look like if you're still teaching online or you're doing asynchronous teaching? Something innovative that you can come up with now that you've had a little bit of experience?
Yeah, I think, it's a learning curve. This certainly wasn't the plan. But yeah, I think one of the things I've just was thinking about during this session was locating a partner, a similar program within country and connecting the two groups so that they could work collaboratively. I think that would give them the opportunity to have these kind of sidebar conversations about, what is it really like to live in these countries and use healthcare systems. So instead of just having, reports and demographics and outcome measures, they can speak to it personally. I think, so I was thinking about that. So I need to do some research to find out, how I could connect them. I think that would be a great idea. I do think students really do enjoy the travel aspect of it, but I think going forward we'll always probably have a tighter connection with the online and the travel because it just enriches the whole experience for both. Hopefully that answers your question.
Oh no, that it does really well. Thank you. And Jessica, I know everyone kind of talked about new challenges, but was there anything in particular that you totally were just not expecting that totally threw you off, and did you have to make like serious adjustments?
Um, Actually, no. And that was what surprised me about the whole thing. I thought, oh, communication is going to be horrible. It's going to be horrendous because we already have enough problems with Zoom and students and not talking to each other. And, like it turned out that that actually wasn't the case at all. And I think a lot of it is due to the fact that we had a shared Discord server. Discord is on 24 hours a day, and everybody could go back and forth. And I had also talked with an industry colleague who said, yes, you have to come up with meeting times where everybody meets at the same time every day consistently, so that you're able to get that group communication in, even with remarkable time differences. And I think because of that, it was a much better experience than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, thank you. And Rick, I see your hand is up.
Sure. Again, I can tell that all the panelists today have obviously done pretty phenomenal, innovative activities, and I imagine that it all required extra work to overcome these challenges. And so I'm gonna, I guess, target one question specifically to Zitang. What you did with your class and connecting multiple campuses and faculty and students is really phenomenal. It's something I've done a long time ago, but nowhere near the level that you've done that at. So my two-part question is, how much extra time, maybe in percentage, do you think you put into that course to get to that? And what were maybe prior to doing it, I guess, resources you might have tapped into to help you along the way? I got the sense from Ian's comment, like a lot of us, we look at the evaluations and use that, but sometimes when we're all doing what we've done for the very first time, we don't have student evaluations to kind of guide how we're going to alter a study abroad or alter a course in the way that we all did. So just curious about sort of maybe what expertise you tapped into and how much extra time you may have committed to that course to make all those connections. Thanks.
Um, Certainly. Hey, Rick. So Rick and I in the same college. So it's great to have you here, Rick. It's very fair question. That's one of the major questions I have when I'm proposing the new course, Global Innovation. How to counter the teaching load. So I have been doing global collaboration, any sort of, you can think, I think I have tried all of them, including taking students overseas at the program level, at the course level, at extra curriculum level. I think I tried all of them in the past almost 10 years. For example, for the global entrepreneurship class, I spend about 50% more time than a regular class. So, my department chair, Shaw, right? So I keep telling her as it's not sustainable for me to do it and manage the students from two different campuses with language barriers, with cultural barriers. And just one simple example is usually not my generation, but the new Chinese generation do not commit any of their time like a week ahead of time, which is, however, the norm here. So I had a group students, they always couldn't confirm their meeting time because when American students ask about if you are available on certain days, 3-4 days ahead of time, Chinese students never be committal. And they will only tell American partners like 8 hours ahead of time. And then she's already booked. So I had to intervene because China and United States have a 12-hour difference. I have to intervene like at midnight sometime and during weekends. Lots of those issues, they are not systems. It just make it very hard for you to find the time to do your own research and you have your normal service load. What I find is one, shorter global projects is better. Do not make it a semester long. Make it more like short-term challenge or make it half of a semester long. That's actually better. Another one is hopefully the 4 campuses would approve the co-teaching model like global innovation, open the door for all RET faculty. Let's collaborate. Once we collaborate, we teaching a section of the course, but we also manage the team full time. We can share some of the teaching load. That helps to reduce. So we are still in the process, and I have great support from Global Education Office as well as the college, both John and Department Chair Shaw. We are just going to talk to other global campuses on how to make it happen. Hopefully, I give you some idea, Rick. I'm still exploring myself.
No, I just to comment. Thanks. That's great. I think that brings up a really good point. That is, we all know that the students have changed in terms of their learning style from when we were all students, and we also know that COVID's accelerated the use of technology. We also know, the attention span in technology. So I think as we're all doing these innovative things that require more time, it's pretty clear that, sort of reassessing what a teaching load and full load actually involves is a completely different model when we start adding all these other pieces from, translating lectures into Arabic to to all the add-ons to Slack and Zoom to different time zones. So I appreciate you highlighting that. Thanks.
Thank you both. And there was a question in the chat, but I think Tom, you actually addressed most of what's in these questions here in the chat. I'm going to throw one to Brian. Tom brought up research and finding time for research. Have you found ways to engage your research process a little bit differently because of the pandemic? Have you found opportunity to write about things that you normally would not have written about because of the pandemic?
I mean, in general, I do a lot of international research. I also work a lot in Rwanda, and I have NSF funding, National Science Foundation. So, but yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm doing yeah. Not a very direct answer, but absolutely, the process of innovation, just kind of like what we're talking about today. Um, especially a project that was the research focus of what I talked about in our panel was about mapping for decision making. And so, again, trying to find the opportunities that these challenges create, so how does a refugee camp deal with doing a survey? Like they had to go do a winter survey where they could not, social distancing, they couldn't go to individual households. So that created the innovation process. Well, how do we develop a survey that can be done remotely using web technology with limited resources and so forth? So all of that becomes material that you could then, from a research perspective, publish on. There's a lot of conferences that look at, if you're in the peer review academic publishing process, there's lots of conferences. One just off the top of my head, Information Communication Technologies for Development, ICTD, like that would be an outlet you could publish, in the kind of context that I work in and so forth. But of course, I had to step up and put a lot of extra time in because the original plan was really thrown off because I was really planning to be on the ground. And so I had to come up with trying new ways of teaching, delivering materials to basically non-English speakers, and so forth. So that extra, so it creates an opportunity to do something like an event like this or publish on it. Um, but again, it takes a lot of time to build it. And then another challenge with that too, from a pure research perspective, if you're a very careful researcher, everything is really planned out ahead of time. Like, I say this and I rarely do it, but you often will have a clear research question, methodologies, and then you go and do it, you test it, you get results, versus like you just had to run out and create some videos without any kind of, baseline testing and so forth. So in some sense that can be hinder a pure research process, because you're trying to report on something that's basically been improvised. Especially, I think COVID created a lot of that. Versus like when I write a traditional research proposal, I write the proposal, I have a long time to really think about what the project is, submit it. Then if you get funded, you can do it more systematically. So I think from a research process, that's something too, that's I think been can be challenging. But again, an opportunity depending on how you pitch it and how you publish it and what venue you submit it to. So I hope that answered your question a little bit.
Oh, it does, definitely. And
Yeah.
now I have one for Jessica. Just anecdotally speaking, some students have actually done quite well during the pandemic as far as, keeping up with their studies and adjusting to learning online. And then some students have had some difficulties in adjusting for a whole host of reasons. And some of them are due to what's going on in the home, maybe some resources. What have you done to engage the students who maybe seem to be slipping a little bit academically?
So it turns out that I'm actually the graduate program director for the master's degree in my unit. And the course that, I presented today is actually, a first year master's class that our BSMS students also take, and we allowed some other people into it this time because of the cultural experience. So we actually have somebody coming in to speak from the counseling center about better work life, ways to do things better for work life balance when you're stuck at home. And like we actually have them coming in to speak next week because we're gonna they're going to talk with them about transitioning back. Because a lot of people potentially will have a hard time transitioning back because we've been online for a full year at this point, and that goes for the students as well as a lot of us, and so there's going to be a transition period, right? And so we've actually engaged with the RIT Counseling Center to send us somebody to talk with all of our master's students, not just that one class, to kind of help with that. I think, in general, I haven't received, of course, like my class has not yet ended. It still has the final exams and all that stuff to go through in terms of the class. And I'm kind of worried that my evaluations, everybody on the reflection is really happy about the virtual cultural experience. However, I have a feeling the rest of my class is not as exciting as that was. And so I guess I'll see that when I get my evaluations back, if there's, a difference there. Because, like it's a matter of, like balancing a whole bunch of different things, right? Thanks.
And thank you. And Rick, your hand is up again.
Yeah, this is to anyone, but I guess I was thinking of either Carla or Jessica having led a lot of in-person study abroad programming with students over many years. I'm curious on either your thoughts in the future, advice in terms of thinking about building in those virtual experiences. I'd like to see our students still have those experiences, and I think in the near future there's going to be a lot of challenges associated with that, to go back to sort of the way it was before. So I'm just curious from either your perspectives what your sort of top two recommendations would be. I know Carla, yours was more of sort of pivoting from trying to do a traditional one to not being able to do a traditional one, and I'm just curious what your sort of top two recommendations might be in terms of that virtual experience in the future, recommendations for faculty member looking to build a program like that or a module part of course.
Like I can start. I think I'm not going to give up. So, as we've discussed, the workload, and the additional just mental challenge of doing all this is a bit intense. But some of the most profound growing experiences for me personally and professionally have been travel opportunities. So I'm kind of a stubborn Midwest person. I don't give up that easily. And the title of the course is innovation. So if I can't embrace that, engage that, and role model that to my students, then I don't feel like I should be teaching the class to begin with. So I don't have the answers. This forum has given me a lot of ways to kind of creatively think about it. And so it's been very energizing for me. So I'm going to just continue. There's not a lot of people I can just go buy a kit, plug it in and do it. So it's just going to take creative thinking and, and just some grit. I'm not going to give up because I think this, no matter what, especially after COVID, this is a global society that we live in. And healthcare specifically, as I think in all business, is a team sport. So we have to really help our students learn to work and understand firsthand, what other people need. That's the focus of all innovation, is the needs and wants of the consumer. So anyhow, I'm just not going to give up. I'm going to keep working on it because I think the value that comes from it is profound.
Thank you. And
Thanks.
to the attendees in the room, I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact that Lindsay has put a little survey here. If you can just click on the Qualtrics survey once we're done today, we greatly appreciate that. And Dr. Salim, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Ian. So my comment is more a comment than a question to the panelists, but as well to Lindsay. I think it's more appropriate towards her. There is absolutely no doubt that there is a thrilling feeling to the international global exposure, and potentially to the experience of sharing multicultural context in terms of the learning. But again, we end up at the end. If I see all the initiatives that were presented by the panel, they seem to be more individual. I would say limit philanthropists, and you can't sustain this kind of activities unless there is a joint, I would say, investment in this effort. So I explain. So if we are to design a program, for example, like one of the programs that we had in Dubai, and then after that roll it out to the world, at one point, sooner or later, somebody in the organization would say, hold on for a minute, if you're training our students in Dubai, who would finance actually the effort that you're doing for this particular campus or the other one? So is there an intent for Lindsay and for the colleagues that you are aware of that will finance actually global or bear the cost of global initiatives where we're training beyond one campus? I would say 3-4 campuses simultaneously at the same time in an almost synchronous way. So that's more or less my question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is interest in supporting these financially and logistically, and with the people resources that are needed too. We in our office, we've developed some funds through endowed chair. We have an endowed chair in Miller Endowed Chair, excuse me, in international education, which is a rotating chair that moves throughout the colleges to support faculty projects and engagements and international engagement goals of our colleges. And certainly some of that has also been to increase the engagement between RIT main campus and the global campuses. And throughout this last year, we've been talking about how do we use that to better fund some of these direct faculty engagement experiences too. But I think there's also a interest in making sure that we are developing courses and opportunities for engagement that have ways of continuing and having the funding and sustainable funding that can allow it to continue, whether we're talking about funding or whether we're talking about a structure and support, whether the faculty want to engage and have the time to continue to engage at that same level. And I think that's really important to think about the long-term sustainability. I know, Tom, you were talking about that in terms of how, and that's been discussions in the leadership of your college, of how to best structure that type of course where you have this interaction between the campuses, and it is labor intensive, and it becomes more complicated when you have to manage not only faculty loading on one campus, but on 4 campuses, and plus time zones and things like that. So I think these are also really great challenges and questions for us to be interacting with and working on together. Rick or Tom, do you want to,
Sure.
in terms of your interactions with the colleges?
Well, I want to sort of maybe add a summary note to that question in your response. You know, the genesis of these panels really comes out of work with RIT Global, but Academic Senate at RIT. You know, Brian and Ian and I sit on a subcommittee of the Global Education Committee, and part of what we're doing with these panels is establishing a better way. And there's some other behind the scenes things that are going on also to make sure that when we're all involved in international activities at RIT and across the campuses, that we have a better way of sharing and having dialogue about what we're all doing, and obviously some of the challenges. So, you know, what we've learned from today, we can take back to the Academic Senate in terms of bringing up conversations and challenges around, if we're going to create these innovative and unique ways to engage globally, how does that impact loading? How does that impact financial resources? So this being our first conference, but really it's to create more of these settings where we discover themes that need to be addressed, practices that need to be possibly changed in policies. So, even though we've been doing these things for a long time and we've been doing panels and presentations related to our global initiatives, funneling it through the academic senate allows it to maybe create a little bit more sustainable importance to address it. And I think there's some great things that we've learned over the last 2 days in the 3 panels that we can bring back to say, should this be a charge for the subcommittee on global education at RIT? So great points. Ian, I'll let you say the closing remarks. I think we're just out of time.
Yes, we are. I was just about to say thank you, everyone. And just as one more reminder, the link in the chat, if you could just take that small survey. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today.
Yes, thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.